Deadpool and Wolverine releases today at the time of uploading this, and considering I just reviewed the Wolverine movies a couple videos ago, it's only fitting that before I see Deadpool and Wolverine, I review the two Deadpool films that are already out. So let's not waste any time. Let's just hop straight into Deadpool.
I am very turned on right now.
This movie is phenomenal. Everything about it. I guess the one thing that bothers me is that there's not much Deadpool. Like, there's only 2 sequences with Deadpool. But there's a bunch of Wade Wilson. Speaking of Wade Wilson, let's talk about him first. Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson is the single greatest casting decision in the history of movies. Ryan Reynolds gets to be the most Ryan Reynolds he has ever been when playing this character. His mannerisms and comedic timing as Deadpool are on point, and I love how creatively involved he is in making sure these movies are good. He really does care about this character. As instrumental as Ryan Reynolds is, and the violence is, and the dirty jokes are, and the rest of the comedy is, the most instrumental aspect in making both Deadpool movies good that I feel people don't talk about much is the surprisingly emotional core that both of them have. Sure, the first movie's really funny and offensive and violent, and that's why we love it so much, but at its core, it's just a love story. It's about a man who moves heaven and earth to cure himself so that he can be with the woman he loves, and then his quest to rescue her after she's captured. That's just the plot of a Disney princess movie. Man, maybe they've been getting ready for the MCU for longer than I thought. But it's a very heartfelt movie, and at the end of the day, that's why we fell in love with it. Well, that and shit like this. One of my favorite things about this movie, and why I think it's one of the best comic book movies out there, is because of its surprisingly small budget. They had to get creative with things. This movie only had a budget of $50 million, which seems like a lot of money until you realize that most comic book movies are dealing with like $250 million, or in the case of Captain America Brave New World, $350 million. And the budget got cut during production. Fun fact, the final battle of this film was supposed to be much bigger, but they got their budget cut, so the way they decided to work around this, since they had already been filming the final battle, was to write the joke about Deadpool forgetting his guns. That was not originally in the movie. He was going to have those guns, there was going to be a big shootout, but upon losing money, they just wrote that. And it's one of the funniest jokes in either movie. And what this also means is that we get to spend less time on these crazy action sequences, and we get to spend more time with these characters. And every character in this movie is great. That's another reason we love these movies, is because we love the world that they created around these core characters. Wade and Vanessa are, of course, an amazing duo, which you have to get right, considering the emotional core of the movie consists of Deadpool trying to save her. And a quick tangent, I really do not like that they're not a couple anymore in Deadpool and Wolverine. What is it with modern Hollywood and making our heroes losers? In addition, our two villains, Ajax and Angel Dust, played by Ed Skrein and the woman who was fired from The Mandalorian, are also really great. Now, they're not the best villains out there. I wouldn't even put them close to the top of the greatest villains. In fact, I think the sequel has a far better villain. But they serve their purpose. Not every movie needs to have big, complex, memorable villains. It just needs a villain that serves the story. And in the case of Deadpool, all you need are a couple of assholes. But as amazing as those characters are, the title of the best characters in the movie go to Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead. This movie has 2 X-Men, which is very frequently joked about in both this movie and the sequel, and I hope is joked about in Deadpool and Wolverine, and they are, without doubt, the highlights of this film. Colossus's dynamic with Wade is hilarious, and I'd actually argue that some of the funniest parts of the movie are when the two of them are just bickering like a married couple.
Finish fucking her the fuck up!
Language, please!
Suck a cock!
And then there's Negasonic Teenage Warhead. She is precious, and actually, I'd say she beats out Colossus and Wade slightly for my favorite character in the movie. And I really like that Wade has a different dynamic with each of these characters. He views Colossus more as a lover and makes a lot of dirty jokes with him, and they just hate each other on the surface, but deep inside they love each other. But Wade and Negasonic kind of feel like siblings. And I actually like his dynamic with Negasonic more in the sequel, despite the fact that she's not as prominent in that one. And I know that this entire group, especially Negasonic, are only going to be in a little bit of Deadpool and Wolverine, at least based off what the marketing has shown us. But when they fold it over into the MCU, they really need to let Wade bring his friends. I feel like a component of Deadpool would be missing if we don't get that whole group coming over with him. Alright, well, enough about the characters. How is the rest of the film? Well, it's just as solid. First off, the pacing. The film follows the typical origin story format. We see the hero when he's just a guy, we see him get his powers, see him struggle and learn his powers through a montage, and then we have the full-fledged superhero at the end. It's nothing that we've never seen before. But the way this movie changes it up is the way in which it structures that. 2/3 of this movie just don't have Deadpool, and they didn't want us to wait for Deadpool in a Deadpool movie. It would make the movie infinitely worse, so in order to get creative with it and keep our attention, they tell it non-linearly and cut between the origin and Deadpool. We open this movie with full-fledged Deadpool kicking butt, and throughout the movie we cut back to earlier points in his life of him meeting Vanessa, the cancer diagnosis, the procedure that turned him into what he is, his hunt for Ajax, and throughout that we're cutting back to the modern day when he is Deadpool. That way it's cut up instead of lingering for too long. We stay on these Deadpool sequences, and then just before they overstay their welcome, we cut back to some of the origin story. And when that starts to feel like it's lingering, we go back to Deadpool. The pacing of this movie is like a masterclass. The pacing in this film is so good that when you're watching it, it's often hard to realize that there's only like 15 to 20 minutes of Deadpool in this movie. Now, if you think I'm crazy, think of the scenes Deadpool's in. The opening car chase, the fight on the highway, the confrontation with Colossus, which is really just one long 10-minute scene, and then the final battle. That's the only scenes where he's in the red suit. It's honestly insane how little Deadpool is in the Deadpool movie, but that's the genius of the pacing. You either don't know, or you don't care. And yes, there are only a few fights in this movie, so they've gotta be on point. And my god, they are. The action sequences in this movie are all just 10 out of 10 masterpieces. The 12 bullet scene on the highway at the start of the movie is my favorite action sequence in either of these films. I also think it might be the scene in either Deadpool movie that blends the comedy, the violence, and the action just the best.
Bad Deadpool.
7. Good Deadpool.
I don't really know what else to say about this one. I feel like I have more thoughts on the second one than I do this one. Everyone knows the first Deadpool is phenomenal. There's a reason we're now on a third Deadpool movie. So you know what? Yeah, let's just hop into Deadpool 2.
And that is why Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants is pure pornography.
Oh, God, I wish I finished college.
This movie was pretty fun. I like Deadpool 2, I really do. It just doesn't have the magic that the first one has. So let's kick it off with the things I really like about this one. Starting with, once again, Wade Wilson. Wade Wilson has an actual character arc in this one. I mean, granted, he's kind of got a character arc in the first one, but in this one, he has a super prominent character arc. He goes through a full character change, and we really get to emphasize the hero side of Deadpool that we didn't get to see in the first movie. And in doing so, we actually learn a lot more about Wade Wilson, But it's subtle, and I like when we get little subtle character beats that don't seem like much on the surface, but when you start thinking about them, they are super important. Here is an example. When going to get Russell, Deadpool notices some marks on his neck, kills the doctor, gets restrained by Colossus, and says,
That kid was abused. You can tell, you can always tell.
The amount of characterization that this gives us for Wade Wilson is insane, and the entire movie has little bite-sized pieces like that. The villain of this movie is also fantastic. Way better than Ajax. Granted, he's not a villain the entire time, but for most of the movie he is. This time around, as promised in the post-credit scene of the first movie, we get Cable, played by Josh Brolin. This also came out the same month as Infinity War. But properly talking about Cable requires that we talk about the full story of this film. At the start of this film, Vanessa gets fridged and Deadpool tries to kill himself, all while complaining about Wolverine.
Fuck Wolverine.
But after he fails in doing that, he finds himself depressed and at the X Mansion, where he is recruited by Colossus to go deal with a mission in which a kid with fire abilities is attempting to escape an institution. Wade starts to care about this kid, but then the time traveler named Cable arrives from the future with one mission: kill said kid. Basically, Russell, the kid in question, killed the head of this institution and went on a path of villainy, eventually killing Cable's entire family. So now Cable's on a mission to kill Russell before that happens. But this time, Deadpool needs some help in the form of the famous X-Force. And if you want to talk about what might just be the single greatest piece of marketing that any movie has ever had in the history of movies, look no further than X-Force. The movie was marketed like entirely on the X-Force. The trailers were built around X-Force. They cast people like Terry Crews and Bill Skarsgård to play the X-Force. And then in their first scene, we get to behold maybe the funniest shit that I have ever seen in my life.
You're a goddamn superhero, you! X-Force! X-Force? Oh my God, what the fuck? Oh God.
And the best thing about Cable is that his role in this movie is basically to show us the side of Deadpool that we didn't get in the last one. Because if you think about it, Cable is kind of what Wade was in the previous movie, a dude who's on a revenge quest and will stop at literally nothing to accomplish it. And now we have Wade going to care for someone, and he really starts to care for this kid and tries to protect him, something that he succeeds in doing, but it leads to his literal death at the end of the movie. The other great thing about Cable is how much he contrasts everyone else's personality. In a movie where everyone is cracking jokes, Cable feels like a fish out of water and the straight man, and that honestly makes him funnier than the jokesters most of the time.
I don't know how to thank you, but I do know how to hug you.
No.
Yes.
But I actually really like Cable best when he gets to join the team, because that's when he is the most badass that he is in the movie, and it's when he really gets to play off everyone else's comedic timing. And this brings us to our third character of the trio in this film that I need to talk about, Domino. Domino is my favorite character in this movie. From the moment she is introduced to the end of the film, she is just little shitting her way through it, and it's phenomenal.
That's not a superpower.
Yeah, it is.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, it is.
No, it isn't.
It is.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, it is.
It really isn't.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
Told you.
Get out of my head!
And as certain as I am that Deadpool and Wolverine is gonna be a banger, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm kind of disappointed that Cable and Domino aren't gonna be in it. Give me my trio. The last thing I really need to acknowledge liking are the action sequences. Deadpool 2 was directed by David Leitch, who directed all of the films you see on screen right now. He was a former stuntman and has an eye for action, which is very evident in the action sequences. Alright, enough dilly-dallying. It's time to talk about why this one just doesn't hit like the first one does. One of the biggest strengths of Deadpool 1 is its pacing. I would argue that the biggest weakness of Deadpool 2 is its pacing. So many huge events happen in this story, and they're all these really intricate and long set pieces that all go on much longer than they need to. Which leads us into the second thing that brings this film down. There's just so much of it. I don't know how else to describe it. There is so much movie in this movie. The first Deadpool is super simple. That works to its benefit. The sequel feels like it has so much meat on it that it honestly starts to have trouble juggling it all. One more thing. This one's just not as funny. Now, people don't mention this a lot, so I might just be in the minority. I laugh out loud through the entirety of the first movie. The second one just gets some chuckles out of me, and it's for the same reason the rest of the movie is hindered. The jokes feel like they just go on way too long, and they get kind of repetitive. The scenes I like to point to as examples are the scene at the X-Mansion, the scene when Cable arrives, the scene when Deadpool is regrowing his legs, and Deadpool's death. They all start out very funny. And as they go on, my smile starts to go away and I'm just waiting for the next scene to start. That being said, the funniest joke in either of the Deadpool films is in Deadpool 2.
You killed Black Tom, you racist son of a bitch!
To sum all of that up, this movie just lingers a bit, which is kind of an issue I have with most of David Leitch's films. I think Hobbs and Shaw and Bullet Train also suffer from this. They just keep going. One more big thing I want to mention is the third act of this movie is a huge step up from the first one, and I think it being a team-up helps with that a bit. The third act of this movie is Cable, Deadpool, and Domino teaming up with Colossus, Negasonic, and Yukio.
Hi, Yukio.
Hello.
And everyone in that group just makes so much sense together. It also means we get to see some pairings and some dynamics that we didn't get to see in the first one and also didn't get to see as much in the sequel, like Cable working with Deadpool. And they're funny, they're badasses, it's such a cool action sequence. The Colossus Juggernaut fight goes hard. And I'm not a fan of deaths in movies being reversed. In fact, I've criticized my beloved MCU for always doing this. If you're gonna kill a character, kill the character. We don't need them to come back because they're a fan favorite. In fact, I think part of the reason, I said this in my Wolverine video, part of the reason Hugh Jackman has such a great legacy as Wolverine is because they killed him. Although they did bring him back, so I guess this isn't the greatest example. However, it works in this movie. Deadpool kept his promise and he dies at the end of this. Granted, as mentioned, his death scene goes on way too long, but I like that they killed him. However, they undo it immediately. Cable uses his one-time travel charge to save Deadpool instead of going back to his family. But it works though, and it sets itself apart from other character deaths. There's still a consequence to it because Cable can't go back and be with his family. Well, until the post-credit scene when Deadpool just fixes the time travel device, but whatever, the post-credit scenes are amazing and they're hilarious and they're the greatest thing ever. It's also Deadpool. It makes sense that Deadpool's existence is so miserable that he wouldn't even be allowed to die. Like, it's a very in-character thing to happen, so it doesn't bother me that he survives. Okay, I think that's all I have to say about those movies. These were a lot easier than my Wolverine reviews. Okay, score time! The first Deadpool gets an A. Just a solid, fun, feel-good action comedy. I can toss this movie on any day of the week and have a great time. It's also a movie where I could show up halfway through and stay through the end of it with no complaint and be very entertained. Deadpool 2 gets a B. I still really enjoy it. I like that Deadpool gets a major arc, and I love Cable and Domino. The action's awesome, a lot of the jokes work, but the movie just goes on way too long and feels like it has trouble balancing everything it's trying to do. But regardless, it's still a fun Deadpool adventure, and I am entertained when I watch the movie. And there you guys go. Those are my reviews for both of the already released Deadpool films. The next video you see from me will be my review of Deadpool and Wolverine. But what do you guys think of the Deadpool movies as well as my reviews of them? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know all that down in the comments below. Also leave a like on this video, subscribe, click on the bell icon so that you get notified when my review for Deadpool and Wolverine drops. And that's going to be it. Have a great day, guys.